if you are creating a line of clothes, have a specific vision for it. So it's not just all over the map and you have like your stamp on it and people can kind of see that. But yeah, it comes down just making sure that it's a solid collection worth sharing.
Welcome to the Church Circle podcast. Welcome back. This is our 10th episode in the season, which means it's actually our last episode of the season, which I'm super gutted about because this thing has just flown by. So I'm your host, Ruben Rovard, and we're here once again with another amazing guest. And this is Dustin Harper, who is one of the legends of the Church Media Squad team. And how are you doing, Dustin?
Dude, I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. And you're based in Indiana, right?
I'm actually in Charleston, West Virginia.
West Virginia.
So,
where did I get Indiana from?
I'm not sure.
Well, this is a moment where we all get to learn about Dustin, as well as I do. But Dustin, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and maybe just how you kind of got into Church Media Squad as well.
Yeah, man, I would love to do that. So I was actually, the first thing I was going to mention was being from Charleston, West Virginia. So
I jumped the gun.
We got that covered. Yeah, man, so I grew up around here. I still live here. I have a twin brother and an older brother. And then, my parents were heavily involved in church growing up. So we kind of have that story of, getting to go to church and all that. But it was a really, really traditional church. So read hymnals, I'm not sure what all like translate with different people, but read hymnals, no screens in the building and that kind of thing. But me and my twin brother particularly were kind of odd in the way that we just loved to go. We didn't have to get drugged there. We went to a Christian school, and despite like all the cramming of, whatever it is, religion, whatever you want to call it, we loved to go. So so I did that. We grew up in that atmosphere, kind of like more Southern, everything else, which is kind of funny. And then I actually, skipping ahead quite a bit, I went off to college to study physical therapy. And it's really interesting kind of to my creative journey because during that time it was a 5-year program essentially. And during that time I actually met a guy who was going to plant a church. I'd never really heard that term outside of like Acts. So I was like, I didn't realize people were doing that in this era or whatever. And so he kind of pitched the vision to me as church planners do, and there was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of everything else like building up to that. And kind of where we found ourselves, we'd done like a year-long Bible study, we're building a core team, we're doing all the things. And we found out like we had no budget, and there weren't any like local agencies, and there wasn't like I didn't really know of anyone to like reach out to for design. So we did try a few of the local ones, and everything just felt dated. And kind of like within my creative journey, this is like I guess like the something that carries through. But anyway, so like I don't know, I looked at it and I was like, I don't know how to do this. I just know it's not that, and I think I want to learn like to be like the guy to do that. So no traditional schooling or anything in that. But anyway, so I was in physical therapy. At this point, I was practicing as a physical therapy assistant, and we're also planning a church. I'm every night, just going to YouTube University. And kind of the first place I started, like any good church creative, was with a pirated version of Photoshop. So I just had that code or whatever you plug in, and we started there. We, as far as like the church goes and all that, I remember, because at this point I didn't really know how to design, and we were getting all these logos that just weren't it. So we were sitting in Starbucks, and I just like grabbed my cup and I just like drew a circle, because what church doesn't need a circle logo? And I just like drew it, what I thought it could be, and I'm not even an illustrator, but I sent it to the designer, and I was like don't go left or right of this. Like, this is what we want. And that was kind of like the creative spark that kind of began the journey. And then, I don't know, it's kind of just learning from that point from people that are, in our space now, so many names that you could throw out. But anyways, So I was digesting as much as creatives that I could, and then from that point, I'm just kind of recreating what they're doing, but not posting it anywhere because obviously plagiarism. And as I felt more and more comfortable to get, my own like stamp on things, I started sharing it, and then kind of fast forwarding quite a bit. In 2019, I started part-time with Church Media Squad, just through a few exchanges on Instagram. And then 6 months after that went full-time. But kind of a really unique part of that journey, I was still full-time in physical therapy. And the week leading up to when I was offered a full-time position here, I was actually, because I was part-time and juggling everything and whatnot, I almost was ready to send an email and be like, hey, thanks for the opportunity, but I just couldn't do it. And I was praying about it, trying to figure it out and all this stuff. And then literally, not even joking, that weekend I had a conversation that I was going to do that. And I don't know how many people even know this, but anyways, I woke up that Monday and was going to send it, and then actually had an offer that was like, hey, it's been a good relationship. Do you full-time? Like, could you make that work? What do you like? And then we went through all that rhetoric. And anyways, I walked away from physical therapy, and that was back in 2019, and I have not turned back.
There you go.
So, yeah. But, yeah, man, the only other thing I'd share is me and my wife have 2 adopted children and 2 foster children, and that's kind of like a big, big part of, I don't know, who I am and what I do. We've been doing that since 2017. So
cool. That's amazing.
We've been on that journey for a while.
That's cool. So it seems like a lot of creatives, especially in the church, they find their kind of God-given skill and talent because they're trying to fill a need. Like it seems to be every person in this conversation that we've had in the last 10 episodes, they all come from a place of, I was part of a church, I love the local church, I love serving the Lord, and I see a need and I need to fill it. And that's why I think these resources like YouTube University, I too am an alumni of YouTube University. These resources are so important, and this is what we try and do here at Pro Church Media as well, is give you the listener, you the viewer, you the part of the community, some resources to kind of help you guys along. So that's super cool. I have one question for you, Dustin, as a West Virginia
What's
boy.
up, man?
Do you say Appalachian or Appalachian?
Appalachian.
There you go.
Yeah. So the first iteration of it.
There you go. So there'll be an argument, I'm sure, about in the comments of this YouTube video.
I hope so.
There you go. But that's interesting.
so.
My wife from California says Appalachian, so there you go. A little interesting fact there.
Yeah.
So we've kind of talked about your origin story and to how you get to the point of Church Media Squad. And one of the things that you're known for at Church Media Squad is you are the merch guy. So last episode we had Jacob Salguero. He is the Gen Z guy. And this episode, we've got Dustin, who is the merch guy. How did you become the merch guy at Church Media Squad?
Man, kind of similar to the story above, but I think like from a really early age. So my mom owns a consignment shop, which is like a resale of clothing and other items and stuff. Anyways, I say that to say that I've just always, from her probably, but I've always kind of, she's been running that thing for 30 years as an entrepreneur and all that. But anyways, I've cared of like what I'm wearing. I've cared what I like, kind of how I present myself. She cares how she presents herself, and I think just like pass that down. So I'm sure there's some like vain intentions there, but more than anything, I just want to like present myself like well. And it's kind of funny because I joke with people, like especially since fostering and raising kids and all that I'm like, man, some days the only thing you can control is what you wear.
It's true.
And today's one of those days. So that's kind of like, I don't know, a little anthem or whatever. But man, basically, so it was right at the start of COVID, because when I had started with Church Media Squad, I was pretty good, I would say, at Photoshop and novice at Illustrator. I could do like print design when it needed to be done, like on a banner, but that was pretty much the scope of it. And I didn't like feeling that way. And so, dude, at the start of COVID, you like set the computer down at 5 p.m. and then move to the other couch and keep working because, you can't go anywhere or do anything. So I learned again. I just got heavily involved in Illustrator with the goal of becoming like the go-to apparel person. And, it was one of those things that it's a big goal because our team is so incredibly talented, and over the years there's been so much talent come through. But I don't know, I just kind of like put my nose down and was like, I'm going to learn these tools, I'm going to do it right. Because I'll be honest, I felt like I was seeing a lot of people just like making a social post and then like getting a mock-up and stamping it on there, and like, you know, there's some merit to that. But what impresses me, especially in my like role as squad lead, is like if I go into somebody's like source files or their Adobe files and whatnot, and it's like, oh, this is going to print really well. It's printing fairly cheaply, and it's a really, really sound, solid type layout. So that's kind of where it started. And then, you know, I just get a request and then get more requests. And then before I knew it, like all I was working on was church apparel, which was cool. It was something I really enjoy, and I still enjoy it. But yeah, man, it's one of those things that just kind of, yeah, put my nose down, spent a lot of late nights learning the tool, and, you know, thankfully it paid off.
It's cool because it seems like, I know people often talk about COVID as being a big turning point for the church. But in our conversations we've had over this podcast series, it feels like COVID was a real incubation period for creativity, especially in the church. Like in the last 3 years since COVID, we've seen this like acceleration of this kind of like catalyst effect of church creativity just going crazy. And I think it feels like COVID was almost like the incubator that kind of gave creatives the time and the space to really work on their craft. Like you were saying, like you were doing stuff to the point where you're like, I'm good at this, but then you're like, I want to kind of finesse my skills in multiple areas, not just in Photoshop. And so, yeah, that's cool. Like, I guess my thought behind that is for people who are in the church right now and they're kind of like still maybe grieving what COVID did to their church, whether that was a loss of members or a loss of tithing, whatever. Like there are good things that came out of that period, and one of those things is that creativity in the church has just accelerated, and we are seeing the fruits of that now. So yeah, cool thought, cool story as well. So how do you get inspired? And I think this is a bigger, more broad conversation about inspiration secularly and in the church. Like for a long time, the church felt like it was 5 steps behind what the world was doing, if we're going to use that language. And it felt like we'd see something on Pinterest 3 years later, and then the church would go ahead and copy that. But now it feels like the church is really starting to make moves, and I'm starting to see the bleed over of that into the secular. So whether it's advertising, whether it's how music and live events are experienced, all that kind of stuff, it feels like the church has got like the upper hand on that right now in terms of inspiring people. So where do you draw your inspiration from at the moment? And maybe in a second we can kind of get into that conversation of secular versus church inspiration.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, you have to have an end goal in mind, and I think maybe that'll be what we talk about when we talk about a bigger conversation. But as far as like immediately where I'm getting inspiration from, there's just a few people that quickly come to mind. Excuse me. There's a guy, Jonah the Brand. He has his own thing on Instagram. A lot of people that I run with and do whatever, they wear his stuff. You know, anytime I talked about apparel design with our team a few months back, and I brought this up, but Virgil Abloh, he's passed away since, but he was just such a, you know, he did a lot in like men's fashion, and he just had such a visible impact on like how streetwear went. And yeah, it's one of those things I like study and I love it. And other than that, it's just seeing people who do it right, and like Boo Church, you know, their whole creative team, they have their whole like ethos to how they do things. I pick up a lot from their team. But yeah, it's you know, I do my best if I am on like Pinterest and stuff to just always have to bring originality to the design. And, you know, you're not just, like you said, oh yeah, that was good or hot or whatever 3 years ago. And, you know, here we are still just recycling it over and over and over. So yeah, man, that's probably the top ones where I would draw inspiration from. And then, you know, there's some type layout guys, even like yourself, that I can see kind of how you like blend things in to like fit perfectly together. And like I was saying earlier, like if you can get a single color print design to look phenomenal, that's a huge win. And type layout is a big part of that.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't think about that actually. When you remove color from the equation, it does become a lot more difficult. It's kind of like logo design, isn't it? Like a good logo will work in black and white, and it has to work in black and white because it's going to be over so many different formats. But yeah, that's a good little hack there. If you're working working out where to start with apparel design, it seems like kind of trying in just type layout and trying in just black and white and kind of seeing how you can work with less.
Absolutely.
And then work your way from there. Do you find inspiration from anything like, so for example, like in terms of, type layout for me, quite often I'll go to like an antique store or something and kind of like pull out like old record labels or covers or books and stuff. Is there anything that you do? Like, do you go to thrift stores, you go to Goodwill and just kind of pick your way through the t-shirts there?
Oh man. So one cool thing, Charleston's a bit of an older city. It's got like, West Virginia has a pretty bad rep for not being like relevant or current or any of that. But the actual like part of West Virginia I'm in is like maybe the only like, I don't want to say only, but it's the capital city. So there is some like relevancy and there's stuff, but it's an old town. So with old towns, like we have a ton of like architecture that's older and like painted signage on buildings and like, but yeah, that's probably like the most inspiring thing for me. It's like just literally walking downtown and just seeing like even the way that like the paint aged on the side of the building with like, like block lettering and, old signage that's beat up, but you can tell that like it had such a sound design, like typography from the layout. But yeah, that, and I mean, really inspired by like book cover designage, as long as it's something just simple. And then I like to thrift to a degree. I'm not like some people that are like great at it, but if I am in a thrift store or somewhere like that, I'm definitely going to some old magazines or records and just kind of looking at how they play together. And it's been really cool, I think, to see even in the apparel world that like serif 90s font coming back in style. It's almost like retro, like how Apple used to do all their advertisement. It's like that kind of tall serif. Yeah. I know you're probably very familiar with it, but it's been cool because then you look at old stuff and it's like, did it work then? Well, why did it work then? And then kind of like breaking that down. And that's a huge passion of mine.
It feels like we're in sort of like a cycle every 30 years or so. It kind of all comes back around again, whether that's design or type or whatever. So like we're in that Y2K thing. So maybe 20 years, but it's kind of getting to that point where it's like, okay, what's next? So is it going to be, I mean, we're getting into that Y2K plus like now if you see, it used to be film cameras, right? Like people would take pictures on film cameras like 2 years ago. Now it's going back to like the 2009 like webcam quality digital cameras, and like people are using those to do their photo dumps on Instagram. So we're kind of just looping around different times, especially when you bring nostalgia into it, like you said, or like stuff that has some meaning from the past. That stuff is timeless because it means something to someone. So yeah, it's a great thought for anyone listening. If you have Pinterest fatigue or dribble fatigue or whatever it is, just go outside, go to your local town or city, get a coffee and walk around for a few hours, and you'll be way more inspired by what you see and what you experience than if you spent the same amount of time scrolling through Pinterest to find the one design. And also it's good for you. You get outside, you get your legs moving, and you get to see the world. And the world is such an inspiring place because it's created by God. So yeah, that's a kind of cheesy but a cool little thought.
That's awesome. And one thing I'd tack onto that too is,
go for it.
I was just going to add on that if you do that, then you're not just like dragging over an image or three or whatever from Pinterest to have physically on your screen to like draw inspiration from. Like you've actually gone out and done the legwork to see what you want to do and not just recreate what you're seeing
for sure
already done.
Yeah. So you've got this amazing worship team leading people into the presence of God every week, but you're thinking, how can I make this even more impactful? That's where Remix Church Media's motion videos come in. These videos add that extra element to your services, making it visually dynamic and super engaging. Head to the links in the description to check out Remix Church Media's new motion videos. Now, back to the episode. And you can write off the whole thing as a business expense, so everyone wins. So in terms of like this big conversation is with the church and secular, and I don't like really separating those two necessarily, because I think there's definitely a bleed over between the two,
Fully.
especially when you think about the church being a group of people. But the church as, let's say, an organization, how much inspiration should it draw from the secular, and how much, obviously we're called to be light in the world and to kind of influence the world. But, we also we don't need to stay relevant, but we want to reach people where they're at. So how do you balance those two things, especially for like churches that are maybe kind of branching out and thinking about, okay, what about apparel design? Like even that as a step is a big thing for some churches, because they go back to where Jesus flipped the tables over in the temple. And it's that whole idea of, okay, well, what, is this a product? Is this something we're selling? Is this, so what are your thoughts on that? I'm really interested to hear this.
Man, it's interesting. And I think we'll just call this the bigger conversation. And if I go too far one way or another, we'll just figure it out. But I think, again, it comes down to what's your end goal. And as I was thinking about what we chat about today, like most creatives, I've also served as a worship leader for some time. And man, I kind of take that same thought process as a songwriter for the local church or worship leader for the local church. And, it's kind of like, so what is a win for apparel design or songwriting or anything creative? It's like, the win isn't that the whole church has the same haircut or comes in the same jeans. They used to be skinny, now we're going baggy or whatever. Like, the whole goal isn't just to look the same. Yeah. And the whole goal of like apparel design isn't just to make something that just my friends want to wear. So I think it comes down to like, with Liz, like anything else, it's like vision. And not like your vision statement. It's like, where are you headed? What's trajecting you? And, when you're designing, and I'll get into the question a little better in a second, but, you're designing for blue collar workers, white collar workers, single moms, stay at home, whoever it is, you're designing for a specific group of people. And that is where I kind of start the conversation with people who are hesitant. And like at the end of the day, like, yes, there is an extent where you shouldn't be, there's obviously people that have abused selling things in the church. We can all agree to that. But like at the end of the day, like God just wasn't receiving the worship that he's worthy of. And that's where the heart matter was. So that's like, even in apparel design or what, like I was saying, songwriting and stuff, it's like, as long as you're returning like your breath or your thoughts or your whatever back to God who deposited them to you in the first place, then like, that's where, for me, that's where there's a win. And then as far as secular and religious cultures, or however you phrase it, the church, I think that there's a ton of spillover. I think that, and I talked a little bit about this when I spoke to our team, but you look at the early church and whatever, old church and whatnot, but they were the ones who creatively ran the world, like with their architecture, their stained glass, the way that they like, even down to like priestly robes, the way that they're just decorated and, whatever. And, so yeah, I think that I think we're finally getting a seat back at the table. I think for a long time, we went through cheesy church culture and no one really asked for it. We just found ourselves there. I don't really know how, but yeah, man, I would agree with you. I think we're getting a seat back at the table. I think that there's so many podcast episodes out right now in the world about like our generation and probably the generation coming up under us even more so. Like, we're just kind of tired of flashy and you can wear jeans to church. Like, we don't care about that. Like, we want authentic something. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what it's coming down to. So I think even the world as a whole is observing that transfer. And, you could be on TikTok or Instagram or whatever and see that. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe it's not for me, but at least it's not as fake now. Sure. And so, yeah, I think so stylistically, yeah, I think there are creatives. I think there's, full body of churches that are doing some things in the creative world that the secular world's drawing from. And, I think that kind of vice versa, we look at things that get inspired every day. And I think that we'll say secular creatives probably are looking at the church world sometimes and seeing kind of what they're doing too, to some extent. So yeah, I mean, again, I think we all want to see back at the table. And I think that, being authentic in how we create is how we'll achieve that.
Yeah, I think if you think about it as artists look at other artists, it kind of breaks down those barriers, doesn't it? Like it doesn't necessarily, in terms of inspiration, doesn't necessarily matter about the message, especially for, let's say, secular creatives. They're not looking at the message behind it. They're looking at like what it looks like and how that inspires them and what it means to them. So it's I think when you think about it as artists looking at other artists, it kind of breaks down some of those walls. It's like, okay, well, I'm inspired by this, but it doesn't necessarily mean the message is going to be the same thing. And yeah, no, it's cool. I think as well, like when it comes to apparel, I think it's a great thing for the church as a entity, because what it means is, and especially at this younger age, it means people are wanting to represent what the gospel means. They're wanting to represent what it means to be a Christian, to live for God outside of the church. So it's not something they just wear on Sundays. It's something that they can carry with them, and it's a conversation starter, and it's something that they literally wear, and people look at them, and it's part of their identity. And I think there's a period of time, even in the last 10 years, where that wasn't a thing, especially for our generation and younger. So if kids, if Gen Z, if millennials are going to wear clothing anyway, which I hope they are, I hope they're just going to walk around naked.
Yeah.
They're going to be wearing something, so why not wear something that conveys a message that encourages someone or brings hope or sparks a conversation when they can introduce the gospel to them. So yeah, I think if you're on the fence as a church,
and I think that
if you're on the fence as a church, then I would just say, like, maybe try some apparel, maybe try, like Dustin said, like try choosing the right audience and maybe working with some of the younger people in your church first, and kind of see what their thoughts are and whether they take to it. And if they do, maybe you could really have a small little ministry on your hands where people are going out and actually introducing people to Jesus without it being within the church walls. But yeah, you go ahead, Dustin. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to kind of echo or add to that too, that, people get more excited to wear things that don't just like have your church's logo on it right in the center, or, something you give out as like a first time guest, whatever. But I think if you can, like anything, a brand identity or some type of system where it's propelling a message, then people get way more excited about that. Even though obviously like your church name is something that's like probably special to you and that's cool, but it's like, how do we get people to not just want to take whatever church shirt we give them and put it in their like closet to never wear? How do we get them excited about it? And I think that, like you were saying, like messaging and obviously style is a big part of that. And I think, sometimes if you don't know where to start as a church and you're listening, less is more. And that's where I usually try and get people. And then there's even times where like church media squad clients I'll be working with, they'll send me like their inspo, and it's like, respectfully, it's things that have been done for the past like 5 years or more. And I'll be like, okay, if you're okay to collaborate, like I'll happily make that. But if you want to collaborate, this is maybe where I would add my creative voice to. And man, we really have had some success stories with that. And then what's really cool is you get to continue to work with those churches on other graphics, and you'll see them like they'll share like photos for like to put on another an event or something, and like half the church has the shirt on, and it's like, dude, this is a pretty cool thing, because it doesn't just say their church name. It doesn't like it's a fully developed apparel line of stuff, and you'll see multiple people leading worship wearing it, and that's when I think you win, is when your church is excited to wear it and not just wearing it because they're like coming to your church.
Mm-hmm. I remember this is like one of my only forays into church merch. This was back in 2016 or 17, and I just started out in design. And so there was this big conversation around like, do we get some t-shirts for like serving team? And I was like, yeah, let's go. Like at the time, like long line t-shirts were more of a thing. So it was really hard, especially in the UK, to find a like printer that would do kind of like a low run like number of items
Okay.
and still do them in fashionable cuts or garments. And so I ordered this thing, and they were so long line that they were basically like dresses at this point. And there was no going back. So we gave them out to people in the church, and I was looking at 50-year-olds, who weren't necessarily slim.
Yeah.
They're wearing like these long line t-shirts, and I thought, what have I created? Like, I have literally,
Right.
I have done a disservice to the church. I have not represented this well. So there is a fine line to balance, but I think you're right. Less is more. Focus on the audience and have the vision, because I didn't have the right vision for that. And, I didn't think about who was going to be wearing it. I should have thought, there's going to be a 50-year-old that's going to wear this. Probably shouldn't be long line.
For sure.
Because only really young people at the time could pull that off. And still, even now, like it would have fallen out of fashion within 2 months. So, yeah, it's some good thoughts. I think that's my big takeaway is focus on vision, keep it simple. Do you have any other kind of final thoughts, maybe for someone in a church who's thinking about starting some apparel, maybe for someone who's just a designer like us who wants to run something on the side as a side hustle? Kind of what should their expectations be, and what should they really focus on?
Yeah. So if you're already equipped, an illustrator, and you feel like you're equipped to design clothes, if you're at that point, I think the main thing to think of is printability. Don't just like crap something in Photoshop, throw it on a mock-up, and expect it to come out, and you not pay an arm and a leg, for some crazy like DTG printing or whatever, if you get into that kind of stuff. And so I think that there's a ton of resources out there, but the one thing that I would encourage is just remember the end goal when you're creating those. If you are creating a line of clothes, have a specific vision for it, so it's not just all over the map, and you have like your stamp on it, and people can kind of see that. But yeah, it comes down, I think, mainly, man, just to just making sure that it's a solid collection worth sharing. And then once you kind of gain that traction and stuff, getting a relationship with a local printer, like you were saying, you had a hard time getting print and all that. And there's some print on demand services, but there's nothing like physically being able to go to a shop, see the screens sliding, and be a part of that process. So, but yeah, I think that when it comes down to it, you just have to remember what is the goal?
Sure.
Where is the gap? What are you feeling? So yeah, and then I'm sure there's people out there that are better at it than we are even. But I think that just making sure that you're ready to have that vision push forward.
That's some great thoughts. How can Pete, let's say there's someone that wants to kind of reach out and speak to you a little bit more, maybe get some advice. How can people do that? Is it just a case of finding you on Instagram, or how can we find more?
Yeah. Instagram is my primary source. I was going through a website overhaul over the Christmas break, and it's not quite there. So just Instagram DM would work perfect. If it's about apparel, or even, I've been working at Church Media Squad since 2019 and loving it. We have just the best team of creatives. And, if you have any questions about anything in that regard, or even faith or whatever, I'm more than available. And I definitely am not to the status where I'm not reading messages. So I definitely read everything that comes through.
That's cool. Has anyone ever told you sound like Owen Wilson?
I've gotten different things like that. I definitely, around here, like I don't have a thick accent, but when I go on like retreats or hang out with people from the squad, they're like, you have an accent. And I'm like, this is kind of news to me, because people around here have a very, very thick accent.
But when I close my eyes, I literally hear Owen Wilson. So,
hey, sorry, I'm not him.
Well, you could start an Instagram page where you just do impressions of Owen Wilson. Can you say wow? Or am I putting you on the spot?
No, I mean, wow.
There you go. That's Owen Wilson right there.
I tried to give you a little Owen Wilson. That wasn't how I would probably say it.
If you guys made it to the end of the podcast, that was a special moment. But thank you so much, Dustin, for having us, or for being here, and for kind of sharing your wisdom. And I'm excited to kind of see what you keep producing. And thank you guys for listening to the podcast for the last 10 episodes. We'll be back hopefully later this year with a new season, some more exciting guests, and some more cool conversations about Christian creatives. But we are Church Circle, and this has been the Church Circle podcast, the podcast that celebrates church creatives, and we'll see you guys very soon. Thanks again, Dustin.